Hi, welcome back to my follow-up video, my second video that's 100% definitely being filmed on time, edited on time, posted on time. I'm back. Hi, so today I wanted to do my top 10 best and worst books of the year. I tried to film my top 10 worst books of the year and I got really mean. So I thought that I would combine these two videos and put them together so that I can balance out the mean and the niceness and not bring more negativity into the world. So yeah, I thought the way that we're going to structure this video is I'm going to tell you my top 5 worst book, then my top 5 best, and then we're going to keep going until we get to number 1 best and worst books of the year. As I mentioned in my previous video, I have not had any 5 stars, so this hasn't been like the best reading year for me, but I have had some goods and I have had some flops, so I feel like there's a lot of content for today's video, so I'm just going to cut right to it and we're going to start talking books. So my 5th worst book is honestly weird. It is Finessing the King by Agatha Christie. It is a Tommy and Tuppence mystery. Now, I can hear some of the people going, who the hell are Tommy and Tuppence? And I'll be honest, I also ask that question currently, even though I read the book. It is a short story, so I'll give Aggie that. I am an Agatha Christie fan. So I love me a Poirot, I love me a Miss Marple, but Tommy and Tuppence, they're not cooking for me. I was just overall pretty confused the whole time. Like I never at any point knew what was going on. The names were confusing. I didn't know who was the looking into the mystery and who was a suspect. I could not figure out who died. I could not figure out the crime. So the whole book, I was just like, huh? It is really short, so there wasn't a lot of time to iron things out. But I go to Agatha Christie to be relaxed and calm, not be confused. So this was kind of a flop in that department for me. I genuinely cannot do a plot summary. Like, I do not know what happened. I will probably not be reading another Tommy and Tuppence mystery, but I will definitely be giving my girl Aggie more reads because I just love her. And now onto the good books. So my 5th best book of the year was We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. You may know her work from Haunting of Hill House, that Netflix show. She wrote the book that the show is based on. So she's a classic writer from the 60s in the kind of thriller genre, and her books are kind of just generally quite eerie. So this book is about 2 sisters who live in this big massive mansion and in this town where everybody hates them for some occurrence that we don't know what happened. So we learn about whatever this mystery is throughout the story, but generally this book is, what I think the strongest parts of it are the atmosphere. It's pretty uncanny. So if you're a fan of like Coraline, or honestly like it gave me Series of Unfortunate Events kind of vibes, if you like that kind of environment, I think you would enjoy this book. It has kind of a feminist leaning to it, so it's interesting to read that kind of book from the 60s. A lot of classics don't necessarily have that. I read some thrillers this year that I could like really see the connective tissue between modern thrillers and this book. So if you're interested in the thriller genre, I feel like this would be an interesting book to read just to contextualize where some of those themes have come from. Also, if you're afraid of classics, it's really short and I found it very easy to read. Like, you don't really know what's going on for the first bit, but that's kind of the conceit of the book. So I would say it's worth it if you've never read a classic before. I think it's a great place to start. My 4th worst book is a book that aggravated me for personal reasons, One Italian Summer by Rebecca Searle. This book, I don't think is a bad book in its essence, but I was aggravated because I went into it expecting something and that is not what I received from this book. So I read it in January thinking that it would get me in the vibe for my trip to Italy, because I was going to Italy in January and I was like, you know what, let me read some Italian based books. And to be honest, kind of shocked, it is not the setting for a lot of common and like current books. So I was kind of confused about that. So picked this book up, was like, oh yeah, let's read about this Italian summer. It really did not hit for me. I really did not like it. It was kind of an expectation versus reality, so I'm going to say that's my fault. It's a competently written book. It just aggravated me. I felt like the conceit of this book just wasn't explored very deeply. So I haven't explained that yet. The book is about a woman whose mother has just died, and they had this plan to go on this trip to Italy that was recreating a formative trip in her mom's 20s. So the mother passes away, but then the daughter decides to still go on this trip to kind of still feel connected to her. And post her mother's death, she's kind of thinking about everything in her life. She's like, do I want to divorce my husband? Am I even happy? Like, what's going on? So she's using this trip as well to kind of figure out like what the heck's going on. So that's a part of it. It's about the mother-daughter relationship. She's like trying to find out stuff about her mom. But there's also this magical realism thread throughout that I didn't know was there before I picked the book up, that I just like felt like it wasn't used in a way that explored the themes set up in the book deeply enough to really warrant it being there. It's like, I would say through this book, they're trying to talk about, you know, motherhood. You don't like, you know, parents are their own people. They're not just kind of a connection of you. They have their own lives, they make their own mistakes. But I don't feel like that was explored very deeply. And the main character's reactions to finding information out is just kind of like a hissy fit, low key. I just felt like it wasn't doing a lot with what it had. Like the setting was great, the vibes were there, but the vibes were not matching like the story. It was very much, I want a beach read with slight deepness, but not like actually anything profound. If you enjoyed kind of the themes that I talked about and thought like, oh, that might be interesting in an Italy setting to learn about motherhood and girlhood and having a parent, read Elena Ferrante, read the Neapolitan Quartet. But specifically, I would say read The Lost Daughter. It also kind of has like eerie themes of magical realism. It's not as sunshiny. Obviously, Elena Ferrante is not a very sunshiny writer, but I think it explores those themes in a more nuanced way. And I got way more out of that book than I ever got out of One Summer in Italy, or whatever the hell this book is called. So now we're on to fourth best book, and this is kind of a classic booktube book. It is If We Were Villains by ML Rio. I do not know what took me so long to read this book, but I'm so glad that I did. It is a modern classic in the dark academia world. This winter, I was really into reading dark academia, so I'm glad that I got around to this book. It is about a Shakespeare acting program at a very prestigious liberal arts college on like the east coast of the US. So that's the kind of vibe. We know those vibes from The Secret History. It's very similar to The Secret History. But what I will say about this book versus Secret History is I felt that the characters were kind of more likable and relatable, I would say. Not that that's necessarily better or worse, but I will say that this book, the characters' motivations kind of made a bit more sense. It was less acting out of just complete hubris and more just like stupid people in their early 20s who are like high on their own supply and think they're the best, but not in like a crazy way like The Secret History. I would say that if you're thinking about getting into dark academia and you missed literally anybody else talking about it, read If We Were Villains. It's so good. It was like, it made me believe that books could be good again. I had a really bad start to the year for reading. I just kept reading flop after flop, and I couldn't find a new book that I liked. I just kept rereading old books. This was the first book that I read this year that was like, oh my God, now I remember why I do this, why I read new books and like, you know, engage with book content so that I can find new faves. So my third worst book of the year is Two Can Play by Ali Hazelwood. I had not read an Ali Hazelwood before this year. I read my first one, Checkmate, which is her YA book, and I thought it was really cute. And I was like, let me kind of just see what else there is to offer. I hadn't really been interested in The Love Hypothesis, so I thought, why don't I just try this one out? And I found Two Can Play, which is actually a Spotify exclusive, which should have been my first red flag. It's a Spotify exclusive audiobook. I got it on Hoopla, and it was just cringy in a way that Checkmate wasn't. And I don't know if it's because Checkmate was about teens and like 18-year-olds, and this book was about adults, and I would say the 18-year-olds potentially had a bit more maturity than these grown adults with jobs. Yeah, it was rough. There was some very cringe red flags that I just kind of like breezed by because I just wanted to finish the book. But honestly, looking back, I should have just DNF'd it like right away. So the premise of this book is there are two game development companies that have a lot of beef historically. They don't like each other, but they need to come together to work on this game project. So they are shipped off to a winter retreat cabin, and it sounds lovely, to be honest. And our female and male characters are like the lead designers for both companies, and they have a classic enemies to lovers, wherein they're not actually enemies. It's just that one time the guy said something weird and the girl was like, well, he hates me forever and I'm never going to read into anything else. So that's not my favorite kind of enemies to lovers. I do like it as a kind of trope, but I just feel like sometimes the word enemies is used very, 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 very loosely. There was a very particular moment that I will point out here that was honestly on me for not recognizing it's the first red flag. When they find out that they got this gaming contract, the narrator describes an adult that they work with getting up and celebrating by doing the floss, like the dance. And that's honestly when I should have pulled out the AirPods, put them back in the case, taken a flight to the ocean, thrown my phone into the ocean. However, I did not do any of those things. I just continued to listen and suffer. So honestly, I just think potentially that this book and her books are not for me. I can see where the interest comes from. It's like a fun read if that's what you're into. Like I can see the draw, but I just do not think that there's ever going to be a world where Ali Hazelwood is my favorite or I give a 5-star. So I think I just need to stop reading books that I know I'm not going to like and start picking better books to read, because I do this constantly. I did it so many times this year where I'm just like, I need an audiobook, let me pick one. Okay, that one. No thought, just pick. And sometimes that works out. Like you find a gem that you never knew you would like. Like We Have Always Lived in the Castle was one of those. I was just like, well, you know what? I'll try it. And then this is one of the flops. I need to just stop going on Hoopla and being like, okay, let's put some more thought. This is me talking to me. This is a mirror. Put more thought into the books that you pick in 2025 or else. Okay? My third best book is actually a sci-fi written by a man. Who could have foreseen this? My third favorite book of the year was Red Rising by Pierce Brown. I really enjoyed this book. It was such a hoot to read. Like it was dark and it explores, themes of dystopia and class and literal warfare. But I just honestly kind of had a hoot reading it. Like it read like a sci-fi action movie. And I do love a sci-fi movie. I just do not like a sci-fi book. I find it hard to picture what's going on. When you get blasted with all of this new information right from the get, it can be hard to be able to picture what's going on. And I find that's what happens with most sci-fis that I read. But this book is set up in a way where you're kind of like trickle fed information about this world. So our main character, Darrow, is a miner on Mars, and he is mining so that they can build a society on Mars. So we're in this very like tight environment and setting. Like he's just in this very small area. And then we kind of get to know the greater world as we go through the story. So I think that's potentially what I liked about this book, was the way that the information was given out. And then also just Pierce Brown does an amazing job at describing action scenes so that you're able to picture them in your head. Like this genuinely felt like a movie in a good way. Like I could picture everything that was going on. I could picture every battle scene. I could picture like the epic scenery and everything like that. So I really, really loved this book. Like I'm so excited to read the next one. I know they get longer and longer and I'm a little nervous, but I'm really excited to dive back into this world. I would say if you enjoy the Hunger Games, you would really like this book, because there is kind of a similar like trial included in here. And also, of course, similar themes of dystopia and class warfare, and like, having different sections of society and all that kind of thing. So I would say if you enjoy Hunger Games, you would like this book. If you're not a sci-fi fan, I'm not a sci-fi book fan, I think you'd enjoy this book. And that's how it was sold to me. So definitely Red Rising, a banger. Okay, we are now in the top twos. So my second worst book of the year was actually a book club book, so I kind of feel bad about this. And it is How to Do Nothing by Jenny Odell. So it's How to Do Nothing, Resisting the Attention Economy. Now, when I say How to Do Nothing. Do you feel like there might be like some prescriptive information in this book? I'm waiting for your answer. You can't answer, but I can answer. Yes. If you're writing a self-help book that says how to do something, I kind of expect you to provide like a little bit of concrete information. But that's not what this book is. It's mostly just a series of self-contemplative essays, which is not what I wanted. I think I'm seeing a trend in my least favorite books this year is a lot of just expectation versus reality. But this is, at the end of the day, my list of worst books. It's not like a list of worst books in the whole wide world. I'm sure she has some interesting things to say, but just to be honest, I found it a little hard to get through. There is an interesting part about communes and living on a commune and like disconnecting from society. But every time she introduces a new way of potentially disconnecting, she's like, this isn't the right way to do it. But then by the end of the book, she's like, she's not really said any ways to disconnect from society and the attention economy. She's pretty much just said a bunch of ways you shouldn't do it, which I guess can be helpful in some ways, but it wasn't. Like, I'm describing it and I feel like I'm not even, I can't even get across the unhelpfulness of this book. I also thought that on top of being actively unhelpful, I felt that this book was very exclusionary and like very patronizing. She talks about social media as if nothing good has ever come from it. And I'm not saying that it's a net good, and I'm not saying that everything that happens on social media is good, but I think it is quite daft to think that other people have not found connectivity over social media. There are a ton of people who have very niche interests or very niche life experiences that have found connecting with people online as a way to cope with their life and make their life better. I'm not saying that social media is a good thing. I went into this book looking for opportunities to disconnect from social media, and I came out of it being like, no way, it's actually good. What are you saying? Like, I think she actively, through the way that she represents social media and provides no information on how to disconnect, made me an advocate for terminally online behavior. So like, she did the opposite of what she wanted to do. So my second best book of the year was Crying in H Bar by Michelle Zauner. This is a memoir that has been making the rounds on best list for 3 years now, I guess. So this isn't any new information, but this book is so well written and so good. If you are looking for an exploration of motherhood and motherhood and having a parent, this is so much better than One Summer in Italy. It is a memoir about a woman whose mother has just died, and she's kind of exploring their relationship together. She always felt like her mother really never, showed love, but she's kind of going through her past and seeing that a lot of the love that her mother showed her was through food. So I found that exploration very interesting. A lot of cultures are not necessarily like externally loving. So a lot of people do show their love through food. And I found her healing journey through like cooking and finding new recipes was just so interesting. And I think probably it was very personal in a way that I think it can speak to a lot of people and a lot of people's experiences. So I also think this is a great exploration of the intersection between like the immigrant and motherhood and childhood experience. So Michelle's mom is Korean, and her dad is white. So she's half Korean, half white, and they live in Oregon. So she has a very different experience than a lot of people that she's surrounded by, because at that time and where she was not a very diverse area. So it explores that as well. And honestly, just to cap it all off, it made me cry so much. I just cried constantly listening to this audiobook, like driving, like like full sob. So that's not always a good thing, but this book earned it. Like, it was so concise and well written. If you enjoyed I'm Glad My Mom Died for the just like cutting writing, the unique exploration of motherhood and girlhood, I think you'll really enjoy this book if you haven't read it already. Okay, this one's like embarrassing. So my least favorite book of 2025 was Hades by Carly Spade. Now, this was the first book that I read this year, and it was like coming into the year with the fart, not a bang. It was just so disappointing. I had this book saved for a long time. It sold as like a modern day Greek myth retelling with a little bit of spice. So I was like, honestly, that kind of sounds like a fun romp. Why don't I start the year off with it? And it just didn't do anything of the sort. I am so mad that I did not DNF this like very early on. I was just like, well, maybe it's gonna get more Greek mythy, maybe it's gonna get more smutty, and it just didn't do anything. It just felt like a meandering book that didn't really serve any of the purposes that it set out to. It felt like an average to bad indie romance with the slightest whisper of Greek myth. Like, to be honest, when I was writing my notes, I wrote, it feels more like a Feyre and Rhysand fan fiction than anything else. And like, that's kind of a drag. Like, that's what I mean. It's, I just think potentially I need to give a break to romance because I'm seeing a trend here that there's like a couple romances here that really flopped for me. Actually, like kind of three if you think about it. So maybe I just need to take a break from romance. There's nothing wrong with it. There's some romances that I absolutely love, like are in my tops, but just I think maybe I need to take a wee bit of a break. They can flop so hard. They can just be so bad. And this one was just it was like a nothing sandwich and it made me angry. It's the first book I've ever rated in the 1 star. I gave it a 1.75 and that is like a vile rating for me. It's been a long time. Like I said, it's been pretty much a year since I read this book, so I don't remember a lot of the specifics, but it just made me so angry that I spent my limited amount of time on the earth reading it. Okay, now we're going to dive out of that very negative space and we're going to end off this video with my best book of the year, and that is One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. And like Two Twisted Crowns. We're going to sneak her in as well. This was my favorite fantasy I read this year. I will say it didn't reach 5 stars. Like there's something missing and I don't know what, but it was a 4.75. It was so fun. I just had a great time reading this book. I stayed up like all night reading it. I read both of the books in 2 days. I just like could not get enough of them. It's honestly, it's worth all of the hype. It's been recommended to me by a bunch of friends who knew I would like it. It's huge on Book Talk, and the people were right. So, our main character Elspeth lives in this world where people get magic from a disease they get from mist. Now, I know that makes absolutely no sense, and the first 2 chapters of this book are so confusing, but I swear the magic system is very cool and fun and makes sense. So, people get magic in one of 2 ways from the mist fever, and that's like the bad way. So they get kind of killed because, that's the uncontrollable kind of magic. Or there's cards that people have, and they can control like a different form of magic with these cards. But of course, the cards are all owned by the upper class. So with the magic system being structured the way it is, obviously there's, some class critique going on there. But also it's fun in the way that the Grishaverse is fun. So if you like that kind of found family, some heist of Six of Crows, like I felt like it was a good combo of Shadow and Bone and Six of Crows kind of put together. Yeah, it was just a really fun to read, and I just like kind of ate it up. And I haven't eaten a book up like that in so long. The second book I would say is a little bit less favorite, so I rated that a 4.5 versus a 4.75 for the first one. And I think that's mostly just because my favorite romance was not included, the one that made me kick my heels. The romance in the second book is also good. It's just like it does not hit the same way. But I will say the ending of the series is or of the duology is so good. Like the all of the open threads are tied up perfectly. Little things that you never really like you caught but like didn't really seem like they'd be major plot points are picked back up and tied in, and that was so fun. Have not read a book in so long that I was like physically reacting to in the way that I was for this book. Like I was gasping and like going, "Oh my god, no." And like going hee 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 like out loud like a crazy person while reading this book, and I haven't had that in so long. This book just felt like I don't know, it felt like perfect. But in a way where it wasn't perfect because it wasn't 5 stars, but it made me feel so good and happy when I read it. I think it just doesn't have like the lasting power in my brain that a Six of Crows does. Like my brain is not rewired post reading it, but when I read it, it was so fun. Like I just had a hoot. I love having a hoot. I think what I'm taking away from this list in 2025 is I need to just be more intentional with the books that I pick. I need to do a little bit more research on whether or not I'm going to like a book instead of just making sure that I have a book to constantly read at all times or listen to or whatever it is. So, 2025, I am being more intentional with the books that I choose to read because at the end of the day, I only have so many books I'm going to be able to read in my lifetime. So I might as well enjoy them. But yeah, so that is today's video. I hope you enjoyed. Um, I think that it was a little less evil than when I record my top 10 worst video. That was mean. I felt so rude, but this I think is a good balance of both. I'm thinking potentially my next video might be about all the memoirs that I read because I only mentioned one memoir in this, but I read a lot of memoirs this year and last year, and I would like to share those with the class. So yeah, thank you so much for watching today's video. Subscribe to see if I actually make that memoir video, and like, I think that's what you do on YouTube. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Bye.